Yeah, Nathan, I mean, first of all, Denis has been fantastic to the FAI over the last 10 years. He's given funding of almost, I think, 10 million euros to us so we could fund an international manager. And at the time he came to us, it was a difficult time financially. It was a time that we were building the Aviva Stadium. We were also looking to push the boundaries to, I suppose, have a proper budget to bring a top manager into manage the international team, which turned out to be Trapattoni and Marco Tardelli at the time. So we always knew it was going to come to an end. It's a decade. He's been fantastic. He's a big supporter of the FAI. He's going to be into the future as well in other ways. But I think we're at this particular juncture, we're strong enough now to stand on our own 2 feet. And all I can do is on behalf of the FAI and people in football, thank him for what was an extraordinary contribution at a very pivotal time for the FAI.
It is almost a decade, or in around a decade, since the agreement was first put in place, and the FAI went from a position where in 2006 you were appointing a manager with not a huge amount of experience, obviously a vastly experienced player in Steve Staunton, to being able to go out and recruit somebody like Giovanni Trapattoni, one of the most experienced and successful managers in world football. Can you tell us about how the deal all came about?
Well, Denis's side was that Denis just made contact with me and he said, look, I think you should go and test the boundaries here in terms of appointing a top-class international manager. I won't be involved, or I don't want to be involved in any way in influencing who you're going to get, but you have a budget there if you so wish to take it. And that was a great relief at the time and a great positive sense. So we knew we could go to the market. People didn't know, the public didn't know, the media didn't know that Denis had made the offer. So we were able to go and talk to, as you said, people like Giovanni Trapattoni. And it's one thing somebody wanting to come and manage you, but also at the time to be able to afford it. And whether people like to accept it or not, you know, international managers' wages have become something akin to Premiership wages to one degree. And it was a statement at the time. I think that the whole of Europe stood up when Giovanni Trapattoni came to manage Ireland and said, wow, that's a big statement. And I know when I met Martin ONeill about taking the Irish job, I think the fact that Trapattoni had come before was also a positive factor, because you've had Trapattoni with Tardelli and then Martin ONeill and Roy Keane. They're big appointments in terms of names for world football, but they've also achieved too for us. Don't forget, Trapattoni got us to the Euros and Martin got us to the Euros just gone by.
Have you had a contingency in place over the years that for when this agreement came to an end?
Yeah, I mean, I knew a while back that this was going to come to an end, and the FAI board knew. We knew before we went into the contract renegotiations with Martin and Roy that was the case. So I think from our point of view, we've been able to address our stadium debt. I mean, our stadium debt was maybe up around 70 million at one stage. It's a lot lesser now. Our interest payments are a lot lesser. So it's certainly, we're in a stronger position financially to appoint an international manager at the type of salaries that the market determines.
Because back in 2016, around Euro 2016, when Martin was agreeing his new deal, you said that Denis's contribution is invaluable to the reappointment, that without his contribution it wouldn't be possible. So with the refinancing, have things changed quite quickly in terms of the FAI's financing? Well,
they are too, because Denis was very helpful in terms of the refinancing with Bank of Ireland. So when we were going to the market to move from American hedge funds to traditional banking with the Bank of Ireland, who've been great supporters of ours, he was really important. And I knew that this was going to be Denis's last term in terms of his last campaign supporting the international management at the time. It was important that he did it at the time, but at the same time we were also renegotiating our financial terms. And yeah, we're in far better financial health now than we were certainly back in 2007 and 2008.
The most recent re-signing of Martin ONeill's contract turned into quite a saga over a couple of months. Was that part of the reasoning why maybe there was no rush to tie Martin ONeill down, that you were getting your hat to get your finances in order?
No, nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it. Martin had agreed to stay with us, and that was always going to be the case.
You mentioned the contribution there, like 10 million euro over a decade. It's an astounding amount of money, and it was in many ways an unprecedented deal for a private backer to come in and to support the association in that way and allow you to get somebody like Trapattoni, and following on with the team of ONeill and Keane. Do you now then go out and look for another backer to take you forward again, or will the FAI going forward, do you think, have to do it by themselves?
Well, I mean, it was a unique thing that Denis did, and it was something that he did himself. I mean, he volunteered to assist the association at a time that we needed it. So it was very unique. I don't think I've seen anything like that in world football. I don't know of any other example. There may well be, but I don't know of any other example. But I think now we're able to stand on our own 2 feet. There's no doubt about that. And I think certainly for the medium term, we'll be dealing with managerial contracts directly out of our own funds. It doesn't mean that Denis wouldn't help in other ways to the association into the future, which I'm sure he will if we were to ask him.
Yeah, you've spoken about maybe continuing some sort of a more informal arrangement.
Well, we'll see what that would be. I mean, I think you're always looking for people to support grassroots football, support the performance of elite footballers in this country, and we've a staff now of 200 people working in the association. It's a big business, so there's always a request for extra funding, be that from sponsors, be that from government, and from Denis in the past. But we'll see in the future whether there would be any projects we'd like him to support us in. I know he's always been open to helping the association. The refinancing of the deal with Bank of Ireland is just one example. News Talk were sponsors of us at one stage as well, and of course his contribution as a benefactor has been outstanding to the association. You've
mentioned a couple of times being able to stand on your own 2 feet now. Last year at the AGM, I think the debt was 34 million, so it had come down from 70 million, and he said around this time, early 2018, as a board you'd need to come to a decision whether 2020 was still the target to have fully repaid that debt. Does this affect that at all?
This doesn't affect it. What we will do just before the AGM, we'll meet the media as a group, and we'll outline our business plans for the next number of years. And yes, we'll be looking at reducing our debt, and we'll be able to give some positive news that there's a further reduction in our debt by the time the AGM comes around.
Martin O'Neill announced the squad for the friendly against Turkey yesterday, so he's very keen now to move on from the disappointment of Denmark and missing out on the World Cup, and it was quite a fresh looking squad, a lot of new individuals. It was somewhat overshadowed by what Michael O'Neill had said and the stories in the papers over the last couple of days, where Michael O'Neill had implied that the FAI were essentially targeting Catholic players and were trying to take players from Northern Ireland, and he was clearly very frustrated. And Martin O'Neill, I think you could sense, was pretty frustrated that he was put in the position to have to answer questions about it, and that having met Michael O'Neill recently, that Michael O'Neill didn't bring it up personally before talking about it in the media. What are your thoughts on that whole situation?
Well, first of all, I think we've got to turn the page on Denmark. That was the first part you said. That's 4 or 5 months ago. It's now time to look forward. Martin's announced a younger squad, and we're off to Turkey next week or two to play our first game. And it's a new era for Irish football. That's what Martin is probably announced in terms of the squad. I don't want to talk too much about the eligibility issue, really. I think I've always felt it's the player's choice. Whoever the player wants to play with should be fully respected. I see that in many cases across Europe. You see some Kosovan nationalists playing for Switzerland. You see some Polish players born in Poland who play for Germany, and many other examples. So they're the rules that are there, and ultimately, once the player makes his or her choice, that choice should be respected.
When it becomes so public, do you have to go and speak to your counterparts in Northern Ireland and try and sort this out? Because, as you say, it's probably a wider issue in football, and Ireland lose players to England from underage level, and it works vice versa at times as well, whereas this became a very north-south thing very quickly over the last few days.
Yeah, but I think, look, you're always going to lose our game players. We lost Jack Grealish and other players along the way, and I think ultimately you don't really have to speak to anybody. I think the player's choice has to be respected. That's the way I look upon it. So if Jack Grealish decides to play for England, that's his decision. And if Shane Duffy decides to play for Ireland, well, that's his decision, and both those decisions should be fully respected by everybody.
Thanks for your time, John.
Cheers. Thank you, Nathan.